Good morning. We're going to walk through this completely so you can see how this works today because I need to make sure you understand that you have to do all these steps in order to get duct routing to work correctly. So let's start off by going back to the Style Manager here. If I go to Style Manager and I select this tool, I get these options: System Definitions and Routing Preferences. In order for you to draw any duct, you have to have routing preferences assigned. So if I want to use generic slip joint, if I go and look at what you have in your current drawing, you don't have any fittings assigned. So unless you go through and make these changes, like telling it what kind of a cross you want to use and what kind of a duct that you're going to use, standard metric duct, and then you go and say what elbow I'm going to use, you have to go through this step. If you don't do this, you're not going to get correct results. So I'm going to walk through all these and fix all these right here. We're going to do a round duct, smooth radius, one diameter so it takes up a little less room. And then we're going to tell it what to use for flex. And again, you have to have this set. If you don't set any of this, you're not going to get routing to work correctly. We'll do a couple more things in here. And we'll do a little straight T. And then we'll come over here and set you to use a round angled reducer. Do an eccentric reducer here. And one more transition with an offset. Okay, so we're just worried about drawing round duct at this point. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is click OK. Now, once I have that assigned, I can come back to the Style Manager and go to System Definitions. And I pick the system that I want to draw. Again, if you don't set this, your duct is not going to draw correctly. So I'm picking the slip joint now. Once that's assigned, then I can start drawing slip joint duct. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And one other note in here, you don't have to be in a single line view to draw this. In fact, I recommend that you don't work in a single line view. The best thing you can do is work in either MEP Design or MEP Basic 2-line. That way you can see the entire duct that you're modeling, because it doesn't matter. At any point you can come back and change the display back and forth between double line and single line, but work in double line so you can actually see what's going on. Now I'm going to make a little change here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all the duct that you've drawn in your current drawing. I'm going to pick this and I'm going to go to Properties. And I'm going to say, okay, let's just look at duct, or just look at the regular duct in this case. Actually, let's do this a better way. Let's pick this and just start deleting all these components that are just duct. Get rid of that. We're going to keep these air terminals in here so you can see how this stuff is supposed to work. All right. Get rid of another set of vertical runs here because you don't need those. We're just going to drop out a bunch of sections here, get rid of that crazy looking flex that you had. All right, so once we get all this done, I'm going to make a couple of changes here real quick. The first thing you want to do is make sure you have everything at the same elevation. So if I'm connecting all this duct, what I want to do are these air terminals. I'm going to pick these. I'm going to come to Properties first. What you're looking for is to see what you need in here. So I'm going to pick the multi-view part. That's what the air terminal is. What you're looking for is for what elevation it is. So see how it says varies in here? That means that you have this stuff at different elevations. That's not going to happen in most projects. So you want to set them all to be the same elevation, like 4400. Okay, that way everything is in here the way it needs to be, and you've got everything at the elevation that it can properly be assigned to. So if we take a look at this in 3D model to see where the stuff's not connected, you can see that we've got all these air terminals now that are at the same elevation and the same height. This is what you really want to be looking for when you're looking at this to get ready to start routing duct. So again, take advantage of this view cube, spin around your view, and make sure that you've got the duct and fittings and stuff that you need in the drawing. All right, so let's go back over here to a top view again. Oops, sorry. Kind of rotated on me there. Let's go home. That's always the best thing to do. Come back to our top view. All right, so you've got over here, you have a piece of equipment that's your source. This is what's providing the air to it. So in this particular case, this is an air handling unit, all right? And normally you'd want to draw the duct to this, but that's all right. We're not going to do that right now. What we're going to do is simply draw some duct out here. So I'm going to start by drawing a main duct. So I go to Home, Duct, I pick the command, and I come over here to Properties. So the first thing I want to do is check the system that I'm working with. If you don't set this, you're not going to get the right duct routing. So I'm going to pick SA for supply air. Then I'm going to look at my routing preference. Notice that it picked up generic slip joint because that's the one we had assigned to the system definition. So again, you got to check these two settings here to make sure it routes correctly. Now we know the air terminals are at 4,400. So what I want to do is set an elevation above it, just like you did before. And I'm going to set this up at, let's say, 5,800, just to give it some serious elevation in here. Then I'm going to come and I'm going to check the size of the terminal that I'm working with. So I can set the width and the height. In this case, I don't want to do generic. I actually want to do round. So I want to make sure that I'm using that slip joint. So I'm going to start with a heavier diameter. And here's a piece of advice. Pick from the list here so you're getting something that's correct. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick 300 for the main duct in here. And I'm just going to draw this duct straight down the line here, okay? Like I would be running a main, and you can make turns and everything else and get it set to where you need to be. So the first thing you're noticing, notice how mine is blue. And the reason is because I actually picked the system definition and properties to get it to work. Now, if I want to make a connection to an air terminal, what I do is I'll pick the air terminal first, and let's take a look at its properties. And you can see the connection right now is 150. So that's the size of the round duct that you're going to put to this. So I have a couple options in here. I can come over here and I can pick this little plus sign grip, and then I can pick add duct if I want to. So if I pick that, it automatically kicks me to a duct command. Now where this really gets smart is I can come up and change the elevation here. So see how it's at 4625? So I'm going to go ahead and change the elevation to 5500, and that's going to put in a vertical rise. Then all I have to do, and again, you want to check your systems and make sure everything's right. We're on standard system, so let's go back and make sure we're doing supply air. Okay, and now that we have that, we want to come over here and we want to just snap to the side of the duct in here. Just use that node snap to make sure that everything connects correctly. And give you a piece of advice. I would turn ortho on when you do this if you're trying to draw straight duct. So once we make that connection, we use the connector to create it. It's going to ask us, hey, what kind of a reducer and connection do you want to have? So you can tell it what piece you want to use, a 300 by 150 millimeter slip joint angle. So you can use any angle that's in here, like a 45-degree round. Go ahead and click OK. You'll notice that that puts the tap and the connection in the joint. Now you can also set this up to use T's. You can use either one that you want. So again, it's the same step. Once I get that first one defined, I come over here and I look at it in 3D model and see how everything routes all nice and neat to that piece. That's what you're trying to do. Now, if I was going to connect to this air terminal over here, let's take a look at another way to do this. I'm going to go back to my top view, and I'm going to come over here and start the duct command. I'll show you a way to cheat. I'm actually going to, whoops, we screwed that up. That's okay. I'm going to pick this, right click, and say add selected. And what that does is it sets the properties to match everything exactly for what I selected. So there's our supply system and our generic duct in here. So now we're at 300. I can change the size here and go to like 150. So once I do that, I start my connection here, and I come out here and I draw a straight leg out a specific distance. Okay, and then I stop. So all I'm trying to do is put this main run in here. I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to finish that command. So if I want to draw the flex duct from this point to that point, all I have to do is pick the duct, and I can right click on this and tell it what I want it to do. Do I want it to change the run? Do I want to change the elevation? What do I want to change with this? I can also tell it that I want to add flex duct, so I get options for that. So you can also do this from the top up here, and instead of just picking duct, I can come up here and say, give me flex duct. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap to that in. I'm going to turn my ortho off. I'm going to draw a short little segment here. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to snap. Again, you want to be careful. You want to use that duct in connector to create that connection there. And notice how that does the flex duct all the way down to that component. So if I come back here and I look at this in a 3D view, notice how nothing is changing elevation. It's going exactly where I had it set to be. And I can also pick these parts after they're done, and I can change their orientation, I can change their location. You can rearrange all this stuff as you need to. Okay, let me undo that. We'll get rid of this little vertical riser here. So again, the steps here is to understand the right process for putting this stuff together. You don't have to be in a single line view or a double line view. When you're drawing the duct, start off by drawing the duct and making sure you're checking your properties. So come back here to duct, and I go to properties, and I'm looking for this system. Make sure it's set to what you want it to be, supply. Check the routing preference. Check the shape and the diameter. Check the elevation. You have to look at all these. If you don't look at them, you're not going to be able to route duct correctly. Now, if you look down here a little bit further, there's a couple other option settings you have when you start to route. One is what the bend method is. Do you want to use an elbow, or do you want to use an offset or a transition? I'm just going to use a standard set of elbows now. So that's one way that you can adjust routing. There's a couple other things you can do down here. If I look at the branch fittings, I can come down here and say, what do I want it to use? Do I want it to use a T or a takeoff? So again, I'm doing all this while I'm routing the duct. And I can tell it what the terminal to duct connection is. So here's that elbow with rigid duct. That's the default. But if I want it to automatically connect flex, I just simply pick flex. Then I can come back here and look at fitting settings. And this is going to open that same dialog for the routing preferences. So you notice this is where we set all the round stuff before. Okay? And I get a couple more options on the command line I can pick from, or I can just come back here to properties and I can take a look at it. And then I have my preferences in here. And so my preferences tell me what to do with my elbow layout. What angle am I going to use for slope? And am I going to automatically create a riser at a new elevation? And the answer is always going to be yes in that case, unless you're doing slope duct. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now to draw another duct, I'm going to go ahead and pick the size of this duct. Okay. Let's go back and check our properties. Again, I want to make sure that it's at the right elevation. Yep, it's 5800. There's that size, 150. So if you remember, we just told it that we're going to do our terminal to duct connection is going to be flex. So I'm going to scroll up here and I'm going to pick a point. And then when I come over here and I snap to this, and again, make sure you use the duct connector, I pick that. Notice how it automatically put flexed in there. So I can go ahead and accept it, and now I've got that piece placed. And again, if the system's not right or anything's wrong with it, you can always pick this component, check its properties, and make sure that it's in the right system. Okay, make sure it's in supply air. And you can also check the fittings to make sure that everything is correct. So that's a real quick way of how ductwork and connecting to terminals works inside of AutoCAD MEP. Biggest pieces of advice I can give you is always check those settings. Always check and look at properties as well too when you start the route. You want to make sure that you're looking at all these features before you start drawing something. You also want to, when you start the drawing, you want to be here on Manage, and you can look at both routing preference and system definitions at the same time by clicking on the Style Manager and looking under HVAC objects. Then I can look here at my duct system definitions and make sure that the one that I'm using has its routing preference assigned. And if you don't assign this, your duct is not going to route correctly. You're going to get the kind of problems that you're having with your current drawing. You can also make sure that you've got things at the same elevation. Make sure you know what elevation you're working at. That's critical to make sure that you know where everything is vertically in the model. And then at any time, you can go ahead and pick this, tell it to add another duct, come straight back up to this guy again. And when you do that, it's actually smart enough to go ahead and put the riser in there for you. And you can look at the solutions down on the bottom and say, hey, I like that solution, so I'm going to accept it. And then I'm going to hit enter to get out of the command. Make sure you're checking your systems here. Make sure you're checking all this before you draw. And even if you screw up, it's okay. You can always come back and change the system and the routing preference after you get finished. So hopefully this is a good little 15-minute demo to give you an understanding of the concepts of working with duct in AutoCAD MEP. Thanks.